My name is Tom Hom, and I live in San Diego County, and we live in Chula Vista. I'm 92 years old. I was born in Chinatown. My father had 12 kids, 12 children, and I was born in Chinatown in 1927, and so I'm the third child of 12, and Chinatown was somewhat a segregated area where Chinese lived in San Diego County. There, next to it was a smaller area called Japantown, and next to Japantown was Filipino Town. So the Asians were pretty much together. And then so as time went on, in our spare time we worked with my dad in the David Produce Company. And I just a quick area I'd like to share about my dad, who came to America in 1905. He was 15 years old, 1909 rather. He was 15 years old. He got off the boat in San Francisco, and he was met by one of the relatives, and he stayed there for a few days, San Francisco. And during those few days, he was taken to the Presbyterian Mission in Chinatown. There they gave him Bible stories. And he was so impressed with the Bible story of David and Goliath. And so he adopted that as his American name. And so eventually he worked his way down to San Diego, where the families, the close family relatives are. And so here's where he went to school and so forth. So, and he later started as a fruit peddling business from door to door. Then later he opened a wholesale produce market. Then as time went on, it became a very thriving company. Everything he did was called David. And my father had high regards, high respect to the system of government here. And when I was young, probably about 10 years old, he took me to City Hall, where every year he would renew his business license. And cat a corner from there, we can see City Hall, 5th and G Street. The building is still there. And he pointed out the building and said, "Tom, in America, the laws that come out of there is dependent on the kind of people they put in there." And my dad, as an immigrant, felt he was outside looking in, but I felt that, gee, wouldn't it be nice I can be inside looking out. And that was my first big, let's say, sense of wanting to be involved in government. And one thing, my dad, with all his 12 children, he wanted us to be part of the environment, part of the system. You know, my brother James was named after basically the late president, the 16th president of the United States, James Madison. And then he named me as part of Thomas Edison. And so he gave me the first name as Thomas, but my middle name was Edward, after a friend of his. And then he named one Herbert Hoover, Hom, the President of the United States in 1932. He was born in 1932. What influenced me is that I had become acquainted to be friends with so many of the people who are non-Chinese, because I was brought up in the Chinese community. And the values can be pretty much the same, and except some of the customs. And then you learn to appreciate some of the fine customs of different people. And so in the produce market, it's like a United Nation, like a fish market. They have all kinds of ethnic groups, Greeks, Italians, and Mexicans, Asians of different kinds, and things like that. It was very cosmopolitan. And so that's the way we were raised. So we have no problem being involved in different cultural things. Well, I got in politics basically. I'm mindful of what my father said, and also too, when we wanted to buy a piece of property, but found it had deed restrictions and we couldn't buy it. And
do you want to talk specifically about this story? Like thinking about a property, was it on Redwood Street in North?
Yeah, well, this was time before I even, much earlier, when my dad was still alive, and between L Street and Imperial, there was a house, and it was for sale, and my dad wanted to buy it for the family, moving from Chinatown, and couldn't buy it because of deed restriction. And even that was at the Southeast San Diego, but they still had the restriction on it because it's an older house.
Okay.
And
Could you explain before the camera what a deed restriction is? What does that mean? Just so everyone
well, a deed restriction is a covenant. It's part of the title. That every house has a title, you know, the lot number and all that. Then they have its covenant, or the covenant would have what you can do, what you can't do, what the zoning is, and all that. And so probably 85% of your properties in San Diego had that restriction.
Right.
And so in some areas it's a little more difficult to buy properties, but
So was it a restriction about who could own a property, or?
yes, who can own the property.
Right.
It said that people of Asian descent, or some of them would say Mongolian descent, you know. So some say Chinese, Japanese, and things, you know, it's different description. And Negroes, and Latino, Mexican, whatever. It all depends how they set it up.
Yeah.
You know, it's the
It's basically like
yeah,
a kind of
yeah.
remnant of Chinese
But
Exclusion
it's a,
Act, but
yeah,
yes.
they say these minorities can live on the property if they are part of the servant or the domestic.
But not
yeah.
everyone.
Not ownership, you know. You know, if you're a maid, you're a, or you know, you have to, you're a cook or stuff like that, and you have to sleep there and help run the household.
It's a way to
yeah.
describe what someone's
Yeah.
role can be,
Yeah.
which is just unethical.
Yeah. They can be there, but they cannot own it. Yeah. But well, on some of my talks, I would bring that up, and I said that those things have been outlawed. Supreme Court outlawed them, and sometime they'll find a copy of that, and they'll send it to me. Say, here's how it looks, and so forth. You know, you still get copies of it somewhere. And matter of fact, when we bought a piece of property near Balboa Park for our 12 children, my dad had passed away by then. My mother wanted a place where the children could go to better schools, and it had a deed restriction. And so my mother went around 4 blocks and told the people we'd like to buy that house. That house was empty for a couple of years, paint peeling, landscape, you know, all in array, and it was 3 stories. It was just right for a family of 12, and so my mother introduced herself and with my younger brother Paul, and said that we come from good family, no problem. So nobody complained, but we took the chance of buying the house. It was an estate, you know. Person died, an old lady, and so we bought the house. We lived there for 35 years. No one complained.
Andale.
But when, you know, but as I sold houses later, when I in the real estate business, some of my friends would say, Tom, I want a house in a good area, but I know the restrictions, but can you help me find a house? So I'll drive them around a good neighborhood. I say, point out the house you like, and I'll check it out. So they'll point out that house or that house. Then next day or two, I'll knock on the door and say, your house wouldn't be for sale. Would you consider selling for cash? Then I have to explain to them and so forth. You know, it's a good Chinese family. They have this business here. And they say, well, how much do you think it's worth? And I'll say, give us a price. It's generally a higher price.
Yeah.
And then he said, I don't know what my neighborhood would say. But I say, well, I can talk to your neighbor. You know, when you're nice, they say, no, they're good people, it's all right. You know, a lot of people don't even know there's a restriction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so my mother bought that house, retracting a minute. We lived there for 35 years, and they had restrictions. And, you know, their kids play with our kids and all that.
Which is a way to build or to construct a healthy society.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even know that they had a restriction.
Right.
Yeah. On TV, when I was in an interview, they asked me about that. I just happened to mention it and so forth. Yeah, I got more phone calls on that, you know. They say, gee, that's terrible, Hom. You know, restriction.
Right.
But anyway, when I went to the State Assembly, we passed a resolution to do away with it. But anyway, it didn't really pass that strongly. But next, it was taken to Supreme Court. Supreme Court wiped that out throughout the country.
Yeah. What could you give the year that took place? Just
I would say maybe about 60 in the 60s, somewhere along there.
60, the mid-60s.
Yeah, in the 60s. I remember the day. I forget the date itself, but I remember the day when Dorothy got a call from her friend at City Hall. He said, Dorothy, I know you're a historian, and you serve on historian boards and these things. But you know that Chinese church on First Avenue? They have rezoned that, and the person's going to buy that and tear down that historical building, Chinese Community Church. And I just want to tell you that. And the City Council have already agreed that that property will be sold and this new structure be going up. And they're going to tear that building down. And Dorothy, there's a little bit of Irish in him. She said, not on my dead body. And then so she really went to work and worked on the city council. And she was well known on the city council. And so they reversed that part, that got to be saved. And they were suggested that build your structure and leave that part of it.
Okay.
The guy didn't want to do that.
Yeah. This is currently where the Ralphs is located. Am I thinking correctly?
The market, you mean?
Yeah.
Right there.
Right.
And you know, he didn't want to do that. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Then he said, well, I'll move it for you.
Okay.
Well, we got thinking, well, it's such a nice building and so forth. So he's, okay, he'll donate this much to her to move it. And then, and then so we checked with all the movers in town. They didn't want to do the job because it wasn't steel, and you know they didn't have any steel in it, so just brick on top of each brick and so forth. If you lift it, it'll fall apart.
Okay.
You know, and so there was one guy that works with the moving company. He came to see Dorothy and say, Mrs. Hom, my cousins, they move adobe buildings all the time here in, I think it was in Tucson or Yuma. And, you know, they move them all the time. He said, maybe they can do it.
Yeah.
Dorothy said, have them come over and take a look at it. They came over and looked at it. Oh yeah, we can do that. So they jacked it up and everything, had cables running all over, and they moved it, and we didn't have a place to put it, but the city owned a piece of land on 3rd Avenue.
Okay.
And
Is
then
this
so.
the property that's near where, I guess, the CCD is?
Yeah, next door to CCBA,
Yeah.
that's where we stored it.
Okay,
Yeah.
how many years, like, I mean, the images of this are with the building on the back of the truck are really impressive. We
Yeah.
have a couple that are as part of our permanent exhibition in the Mission
Yeah.
Building, or
Yeah.
that are in
Yeah.
the building when it was being moved.
Yeah, so we stored it, but gee, he said, gee, where are we gonna get the land to put it? You know, she was thinking about, you know, the history, you know, museum and these things.
Huh?
And Sally became involved and so forth. They say, gee, where are we going to put it? We don't have the money to, you know, buy a property down here. So I went to the city, and well, I went to CCDC. That's first.
Right,
Uh,
which is currently.
the Center City Development,
Corporation.
yeah, Corporation. I went and talked to them about it. They thought, hey, this area need a bit of culture.
Okay.
And, you know, downtown was, Gaslamp was, you know, just still in the Skid Row
Right.
way area and so forth. And so they said, well, what property did you have in mind if we can help get it for you?
Okay, so
So-
the CCDC was receptive.
Yeah, yeah. So we designate that corner there.
Okay, so the J
But,
Street 3rd?
yeah. I was born on that corner. I was embarrassed. I said, gee, we can't move it there. He said, but that's the heart of it, the
Yeah,
Chinatown
yeah.
area there. So anyways, the city bought it and leased it over to the,
The Chinese
yes, the
Historical
Chinese
Society?
guy. $1 a year for 55 years.
Okay.
Because I knew that 55 year is looked upon as almost like fee simple.
Yeah.
So, but we can probably extend it, there's no problem.
Yeah.
But to get that land, Sally worked with a lot of seniors, and she brought a lot of seniors to the public hearing of that. It was unanimous, it passed. And that's how we got the land and put it there. That's how we got the building saved, and so then it grew from there.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely interesting to hear from someone who has a firsthand account.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Dorothy, I think Dorothy is the one, and Sally did a lot too.
Right.
And
Sally is someone who, her name, she is on the Articles of Incorporation as the
yeah,
incorporator.
yeah, yeah. And so anyways, it was done, and then after that, they wanted to make this whole section Asian market, you know. And then they asked me to see whether they can come up with a program that extends farther than that, because there was a lumber yard a little beyond the ice house that makes ice to a Union Ice Company on a program. So I hired an architect firm to look into it. At that time, they didn't have all this big movement. And so what I did, I brought this. It is just part of the work.
Okay,
Can I show it to you?
definitely. Let me know if you need any help.
This is what's called Pacific Rim Center. It was on Market Street down to First Avenue.
Okay.
And that was to incorporate the Chinese Historical Building in it.
Oh,
See,
okay.
this was it. And
So these are some, I guess, conceptual
yeah,
drawings of
yeah.
what the Asian Pacific
Oh, yeah.
Historical
We
look like.
we went. As a matter of fact, we had a lot of support on it at the time. It took in the Pacific Rim. We had a group from Australia. They wanted to become part of it, and New Zealand, and it'd be incorporated Chinese, Japanese, and different groups like that. Pacific Rim.
So like these conceptual drawings, what, could you describe what street they're on? So it's like Bayfront?
Okay, yeah, I will show you what the street, but anyway,
This
these
is
are the
really
drawings,
interesting,
you
yeah.
know. And here's the street.
Oh.
First Avenue right here.
Uh-huh.
See, our church was right here.
Yep.
And then there's a Market Street here.
So like.
This is Third Avenue.
Uh-huh.
And then,
So the railroad
yeah.
tracks are at the bottom of the
Yeah.
image.
yeah, then these are parking, underground parking.
I mean, it's interesting to think about this plan in relation
Yeah.
to what the zone
Yeah.
looks like.
I think it was, at that time, it was too big of a program,
Okay.
of a cultural thing. It was too big, perhaps, you
Well,
know.
what do you mean too big?
Well, it was,
Too, or like
well,
too costly?
it was too big of a change for that area.
Okay.
You know, it's, people just felt, well, maybe too big of an Asian structure. I don't know. I had a lot of good compliments on it.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
it's a
yeah.
fascinating, like the
Yeah.
images are really
Oh, yeah.
fascinating and beautiful and
Oh,
something
yeah.
that I think is really attractive.
Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, the planning department in San Diego, we'd run all this through them as we moved on to be sure to work well with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but somehow or another CCDC didn't feel that, hey, maybe that's too early of the thing, or
So that's where, like,
yeah.
it was met by a little bit of resistance by the Center City Development
yeah,
Corporation.
yeah. I think that there were other things they wanted to do with it,
Okay.
you know, rather
Yeah.
than to be a cultural thing.
Yeah.
You know, gas lamp was just getting on its way and so forth, and I was able to spend time on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.